except in that dominion which circumstances had enabled her to achieve once, and might enable her to achieve again in the realms of London society. And so they had both sighed to be again among the trumpets, without any free communication of their thoughts one to the other. Then, in the early spring of 1870, they came back to England, having persistently carried out their project, at any rate in regard to time. Lord Gerald, the younger son, was at once sent up to Trinity. For the eldest son a seat was to be found in the House of Commons, and the fact that a dissolution of Parliament was expected served to prevent any prolonged sojourn abroad. Lady Mary Palliser was at that time 19, and her entrance into the world was to be her mother's great care and great delight. In March they spent a few days in London, and then went down to Matching Priory. When she left town, the Duchess was complaining of cold, sore throat, and debility. A week after their arrival at Matching, she was dead. Had the heavens fallen and mixed themselves with the earth, had the people of London risen in rebellion with French ideas of equality, had the Queen persistently declined to comply with the constitutional advice of her ministers, had a majority in the House of Commons lost its influence in the country, the utter prostration of the bereft husband could not have been more complete. It was not only that his heart was torn to pieces, but that he did not know how to look out into the world. It was as though a man should be suddenly called upon to live without hands or even arms. He was helpless, and knew himself to be helpless. Hitherto he had never specially acknowledged to himself that his wife was necessary to him as a component part of his life. Though he had loved her dearly, and had in all things consulted her welfare and happiness, he had at times been inclined to think that in the exuberance of her spirits she had been a trouble rather than a support to him. But now it was as though all outside appliances and comforts were taken away from him. He was alone in the world, and there was no one of whom he could ask a question. For it may be said of this man that, though throughout his life he had had many honourable and right honourable friends, and that though he had entertained guests by the score, and though he had achieved for himself the respect of all good men and the thorough admiration of some few who knew him, he had hardly made for himself a single intimate friend in the world, except that one friend who had now passed away from him. To her he had been able to say what he thought, even though she would occasionally ridicule him while he was declaring his feelings. But there had been no other human soul to whom he could thus open himself. There were one or two whom he loved, and perhaps liked, but his loving and his liking had been almost exclusively political. He had so habituated himself to devote his mind and his heart to the service of his country that he had almost risen above or sunk below humanity. But she, who had been essentially human, had been a link between him and the world. Now there was no longer a link, and he felt himself to be dissevered from the world. There were his 3 children, the youngest of whom was now nearly 19, and they surely were links. At the first moment of his bereavement they were felt to be hardly more than burdens. The loss was so great that nothing remaining seemed to him to be of value. A more loving father there was not in England, but nature had made him so undemonstrative that as yet they had hardly known his love. In all their joys and in all their troubles, in all